What would you do if your whole life you were the second choice, and one morning you were sent to marry a man who had never even wanted you? The morning light filtered through the yellow curtains of the McAllister farmhouse, turning the dusty air golden. Annie pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, staring at the Nebraska prairie. At 24, she had already accepted her place as the plains sister. Her hands were rough from years in the fields, her skin browned by the sun. She was the girl who stayed home while her younger sister, Evelyn, danced at socials. "Annie, get down here this instant!" Her father's voice cracked like a whip. She smoothed her faded calico dress and went downstairs. The kitchen was heavy with silence. Her mother sat rigid at the table. Her father stood near the stove, his face darker than a storm cloud. Evelyn sat with a lace handkerchief pressed to her eyes, sobbing prettily as only she could tell her. Her father ordered. Evelyn's tears glistened as she looked at Annie. "I can't do it, Annie. I can't marry him. A rancher in Wyoming, living in some hovel in the wilderness. I'd rather die." Annie's stomach dropped. For 6 months, Evelyn had been exchanging letters with Jesse Hartland, answering his advertisement for a mail-order bride. He had even sent money for her passage west. The family had celebrated, proud that their golden daughter would be well settled. "You gave your word," their mother whispered, though her eyes were full of pity. "I didn't know what I was agreeing to." Evelyn wailed. "Besides, Samuel Morrison has been calling on me. He owns the general store. I could stay here near family, near civilization." "Enough!" Their father's fist struck the table. "You took that man's money. You made promises." Evelyn's tears slowed. Her voice hardened. "Then let Annie go." The words hit Annie like stones. "Me," she whispered. Evelyn lifted her chin. "Mr. Hartland has never seen me. Only letters and that one photograph where you can't even tell which sister it is. Annie could go instead. She's more suited to that kind of life. More suited because she was plain. Because no man had ever chosen her. Because she had always been second best." "That's dishonest," Annie said, finding her voice. "Tell him the truth when you arrive." Her father cut in coldly. "Let him decide. But you'll go. You'll honor this family's commitment." Quote. And just like that, Annie's life was decided. The 2 days before her departure passed in a blur. Her mother helped her pack her few dresses and slipped some peppermint candy into her hand. Evelyn avoided her, though Annie heard her laughter floating from the parlor as she entertained friends. That night, Annie found the bundle of letters from Jesse hidden in her room. Evelyn had left them behind without care. Annie read them by candlelight. Jesse wrote of his ranch. 200 acres of land, cattle, and horses, mountains that touched the sky. He wrote of loneliness, though he tried to hide it. He was 31, a veteran of the war, and had built his home with his own hands. He wanted a partner strong enough for frontier life, gentle enough to make it a home. Annie traced the ink with her fingers. What would he think when she stepped off that coach instead of Evelyn? Thursday came gray and bitter. At the station, her father's warning words were sharp in her ears. "You're representing this family. Don't shame us." Her mother kissed her cheek and pressed her hand one last time. Evelyn stood apart, her blue coat bright, her face without remorse. "All aboard!" The driver called. Annie climbed into the coach. She looked back once. Only her mother lifted a hand in farewell. Then the coach lurched forward, carrying her west into the unknown. The journey stretched endlessly. The landscape changed from farmland to prairie to mountains. Her dress gathered dust, her back ached from the jolting ride, and strangers filled the coach with chatter and complaints. Annie kept quiet, staring out the window, clutching Jesse's letters. On the final day, the stagecoach rolled into Cheyenne. Annie's heart hammered as she searched the crowd. Her father's words rang in her ears, but louder still was her own promise. She would tell the truth at once. A deep voice spoke her name, Miss McAllister. She turned and saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair under a black hat. His gray eyes were sharp and serious as they studied her. This was Jesse Hartland. Annie swallowed hard, her hands trembling around her bag. "Mr. Hartland." I am Annie McAllister, Evelyn's sister. I must tell you something. Evelyn did not come. My father sent me in her place." Jesse's face was unreadable. "She's not coming." Annie shook her head, shame burning her cheeks. "Number. I told them it wasn't right, but I came to tell you the truth so you could choose. I understand if you want to send me back." Quote. For a long moment, Jesse only studied her, those storm-gray eyes searching her face. Then he picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "My wagon's this way," he said simply. Annie followed, her heart pounding. She had spoken the truth, but what he chose to do with it would decide her future. The road ahead stretched into the dark Wyoming night, and Annie could only wonder, had her life just ended, or had it finally begun? The wagon rattled over the rutted road as twilight deepened around them. Annie sat stiffly beside Jesse, her hands folded in her lap, the silence between them heavy. Stars began to appear, brighter than any she had ever seen in Nebraska. She risked a glance at him. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, unreadable. "How old are you?" His sudden question made her jump 24. She said quietly, "Why aren't you married?" The bluntness stung, but Annie forced herself to answer, "I'm not the kind of woman men court, especially not when they could court my sister." Instead, Jesse was silent a long moment. Then, "Yet you came anyway, to marry a man you'd never met." "I came to tell you the truth," she said firmly. "What happens next is your choice." Quote. They rode on in silence until a warm glow appeared in the distance. "That's the ranch," Jesse said. The house was larger than Annie expected, 2 stories with a wide porch and glass windows. He helped her down from the wagon, his hand steady and strong. Inside, the home was neat but bare. Everything functional, nothing soft. "You'll sleep in the guest room," Jesse said. "We'll talk more tomorrow." That night, Annie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had told the truth, but her future was still uncertain. Morning came with the sound of roosters and cattle. Annie found herself in the kitchen, cooking biscuits and bacon almost without thinking. When Jesse came in, he stopped short, surprised. "You didn't have to." "He said I'm used to being useful," she replied. He ate quietly, but after the first bite he said, "This is good. It's just breakfast." "It's been a long time since anyone cooked for me," Jesse admitted. His voice was softer than before. Later, he showed her the ranch, 200 acres. He said, "Built it after the war. Every fence post, every barn beam, my own hands." His scarred fingers flexed unconsciously. "I need a wife who can work, who won't break under hard seasons. This land is beautiful, but it's harsh. Winters cut deep, summers burn dry. Nearest neighbor is Hattie Rose Fletcher, 8 miles east. Town's a day's ride. Some winters, you don't see anyone else for weeks." "I understand," Annie said. "I know hard work. I know loneliness too." You don't survive being second best all your life without learning that. Jesse studied her face, his gray eyes searching. "I'm not an easy man. The war left scars. I have dark moods. I work from dawn to past dusk. I don't talk much." Annie lifted her chin. "And I'm not an easy woman. I speak my mind. I'm plain. I don't sing or sew pretty stitches. But I can work, and I don't run when things get hard." A flicker passed over Jesse's expression, something like respect. That afternoon, a rider came, a young man named Jonah Cooper, sandy-haired and cheerful. He tipped his hat to Annie, his gaze openly admiring. "So you're the new Mrs. Hartland." "Miss McAllister," Jesse corrected quickly. Jonah grinned. "Pleased to meet you, miss." "Jesse's a lucky man." Annie flushed at the open compliment, something she wasn't used to. Jesse noticed, his jaw tightening. That evening, Jonah joined them for supper. He filled the table with chatter, laughing and complimenting Annie's cooking, her flowers on the table, even the way she arranged dishes. Annie smiled politely, but she noticed Jesse's growing silence. When Jonah finally left, Jesse washed dishes beside her. The tension was heavy. "He's a good man," Jesse said, finally young, enthusiastic, with his own place starting up. He'd court you proper if I sent you back. Annie's hands stilled in the soapy water. Is that what you've decided? Jesse set the plate down, turning to face her. In the lamplight, his eyes looked darker, more intense. I haven't decided anything, he said slowly. Except this. This house already feels different with you in it. It feels alive, Annie's breath caught. Houses, she thought, needed tending, just like gardens, just like people. And maybe, just maybe, Jesse Hartland had already begun to see her, not as second best, but as someone worth choosing. The next morning dawned clear, but Annie woke with a restless feeling. She tidied the house, baked bread, and tried not to think about Jesse's words from the night before. This house feels alive. They circled in her head, warming her even as she tried to push them aside. While dusting the parlor, a desk drawer stuck. Annie tugged, and a bundle of papers spilled onto the floor. She bent to gather them, and her eyes caught familiar words, Jesse's handwriting. They were unsent drafts of letters to Evelyn, rough, crossed out, rewritten. Her heart pounded as she read. These were not the polished letters Evelyn had shown. These were raw, honest, words of loneliness, words of a man scarred by war, desperate for connection. The land takes more than it gives, one draft read, but when it gives, a calf on its feet, the sun setting over the mountains, it's worth every drop of sweat. I need someone who can see beauty in harsh places. Annie's throat tightened. This wasn't the man Evelyn had laughed about. This was a man who longed to be known. What are you doing? Jesse's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, gray eyes unreadable. Annie scrambled to her feet. The drawer stuck. They fell out. I shouldn't have read them. He stepped forward, took the letters from her hands. For a moment, she braced for his anger. But instead, he only stared down at the papers, his voice low. I wrote these before sending the proper ones. Couldn't find the right words. They weren't foolish, Annie whispered. They were true. For the first time, Jesse looked at her as if he truly saw her. Do you want to see it? See what? What I wrote about. The sunset from the ridge. His voice was gruff, uncertain. Will you come? Annie nodded. They saddled the horses and rode into the hills. The air smelled of pine and sage. At the ridge, the world opened below them, ranch and valley stretching into forever. The setting sun painted everything in gold and crimson. Annie caught her breath. It's beautiful, she whispered. Beautiful and terrible. Jesse said softly, like most things worth having. Your sister would have hated it. Annie turned to him. How do you know? Her letters were full of parties, dresses, gossip. She wrote about people, never about land. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that a pretty wife would make the loneliness bearable. His jaw tightened. Then he looked at Annie, really looked at her. But standing here, I think I was writing to the wrong sister. Annie's heart thudded so loudly she thought he must hear it. I'm not easy. Jesse said, I have scars, dark days. I don't know how to court a woman proper. I don't need courting, Annie said softly. I need truth, a place I belong. Someone who sees me as I am. Jesse's hand found hers, calloused and strong. Could you make a life here? Not because your father sent you. Because you choose it. Annie looked out at the blazing horizon. I've been choosing it every day, she said. Every morning I rise, every meal I cook, every stitch I mend. I'm not here out of duty. I'm here because this feels like where I'm meant to be. Something eased in Jesse's face. For the first time, he smiled. Tentative, but real. Then maybe we've both found what we were looking for. The days that followed tested that truth. A sudden storm ripped fences down. A calf was swept into the raging creek. Jesse plunged in after it, only to be dragged under by the current. Annie, without thinking, rushed into the water. Together, soaked and gasping, they pulled the calf, and Jesse back to safety. Later, by the fire, Jesse's voice was raw, Most women would have watched from the bank. "I'm not most women," Annie answered. His hand closed over hers. "No, you're not. And thank God for it." 3 days later, Jesse rode to town to see the preacher. When he returned, he said simply, "Saturday. If you'll have me on their wedding morning." A letter arrived from Evelyn. She wrote that Samuel Morrison had broken things off, that she was ready to, quote, honor her original promise and take her rightful place beside Jesse. Annie's heart clenched as she read the cruel words. "Pale substitute. Unsuitable. Burn it," Jesse said together, "after the wedding," and they did. As husband and wife, they dropped the letter into the fire, watching the flames devour the last shadow of Evelyn's claim. Months later, a drought came. Crops withered. Cattle weakened. Whispers in town stung Annie, married the wrong sister, plain as a fence post. But Jesse silenced them with a speech that left no room for doubt. "I chose Annie. I'd choose her again every day." And Annie knew he meant it. When Evelyn arrived in her fine carriage, perfume and silk swirling around her, Annie stood tall. She no longer flinched at comparisons. Jesse faced Evelyn with quiet steel. "You wrote pretty lies. Annie lives truth. That's why I thank God you broke your word." That night, on the porch under the vast Wyoming sky, Jesse took Annie's hand. No more ghosts. No more second choice. "You're my only choice, Annie." "Forever," Annie squeezed his hand, her voice steady. "Forever." Quote, the land stretched before them, harsh and beautiful, but it was theirs. And together, scarred but unbroken, chosen and choosing, they had found home.